When I was at school, when I was a kid, I grew up on the coast in England, and I actually wanted to be a marine biologist. It was really a contest between becoming an artist and a marine biologist. I suppose I've always been interested in the relationship of arts and science, or you could say techniques and poetics. That in more recent years has really expressed itself in a range of interests and a range of projects which see me working in laboratories, see me working in conjunction with engineers and scientists and biotechnologists and things like that. So whilst this current show isn't in a sense a live biological show, there's no real creatures in there, it is very heavily based on an interest in marine biology, in particular kind of marine microscopic organisms called radiolaria. You know, these small creatures which have exquisite silica-based sort of skeletal or exoskeletal structures, and they're largely made of kind of protoplasmic foam. But they often have this sort of radial symmetry, and if you imagine the life of a very, very small creature, they're not really ruled by gravity or the forces of gravity. They're ruled by the forces of things like surface tension. Those are much more powerful forces than gravity, so they almost exist in zero gravity conditions. So the forces that structure them are quite different from the forces that structure us. I mean, we are very prone to bad attacks of gravity when we fall over, things like that, but these little creatures are suspended in liquid, and as I say, it's surface tension which is the strongest force in their particular universe. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually preparing the profile of the major piece for the show. The structure is a series of profiles and a series of circular formers, so that the circular former here and the profile slot in here. It's kind of a tab and slot. So a radial symmetry of 16. I actually hand draw everything because I actually like hand drawing, and then I chop the drawing up, I scan it, and I put it into Illustrator, and I trace around it and turn that into a file, a DXF file or something like that, that I can send off to a fabricator. So this will be about 2 meters long, something like that. This sculpture is about 6.5 meters long, and it has aluminium tubes that run right the way through it, coming out in a kind of series of arms. One of the things that's always fascinated me about the notion of radial symmetry, or the kind of simple structures that, for example, shells have, is the very, very limited amount of instructions that you need, sort of design instructions that you need to actually form something. So In the case of, say, this little piece here, this one, as I say, has a symmetry of a radial symmetry of 16, so that just means there's 16 of these profiles. But so in terms of a biological code, you imagine it's really quite simple. You say, make this shape and repeat it as you turn. So you end up with a structure which is lathed in for want of a better word. It's like you're making it on a lathe, and that's just one instruction repeated several times. The basic form of many creatures is a gut, an intestine, which is essentially a tube, which is what you have in this thing. It's in one end and out the other. And I suppose you could say that's what we are. We're glorified tubes as well. We have a few other bits that hang on the sides. One way of looking at the work, or looking at a lot of my work in general, is a process of hybridization. I suppose in one respect, a simple approach to the work might be this, you could call it a duality between a sort of nature and culture, or the manufactured and the natural, which is a bit of an old chestnut in sort of Western discourse. But quite a lot of projects that I've undertaken have actually addressed that. In fact, there's a large public artwork in Sydney next to the Botanical Gardens, which is actually called Dual Nature, which combines industrial and botanical flora and fauna forms together on a large scale. This current project, their fundamental symmetries are driven or extracted from natural form, but then elaborated in quite a florid way. It's almost like kind of Rococo. Rococo period itself was based on maritime form, so that's not surprising that it should be similar. The almost Victorian obsession with paisley forms. I'm very interested in that, and the Victorian period was almost characterized by both of those things, ornament and excess. I tend to think of myself maybe more as a maximalist rather than a minimalist, if you'll pardon that expression. And in a sense enjoy the... Nature is full of excesses. They appear to be excesses. Nature is very economical, but some of the excesses are, they all tend to be functional in one way or another, but they seem extraordinarily unnecessary in many ways. If you think of a peacock's tail, for example, that's a very simple example of something which is probably most of the time a hindrance to the creature, but obviously at mating time very, very useful. But it is also extraordinarily beautiful.